We're back, like Bitcoin in 2024. Okay, so my name's Nick. I'm the CEO of Casa. We're one of the largest securers of Bitcoin in the world. And we focus on helping large holders of Bitcoin secure their Bitcoin in self-custody simply and safely. And so today I want to talk about a framework for what it looks like to secure a sovereign Bitcoin reserve. So in 1939, the Nazis invaded Czechoslovakia, and as part of their war effort, they needed more money, and so their first order of business was, we're going to steal the Czechs' gold reserve. So you would think this maybe took a big heist or something like that. No, all they had to do was just have the Czechs call the Bank of International Settlements and request that through that bank, the Bank of England would transfer the gold held in their account to the German Reichsbank. And the Bank of England kind of wasn't at war with Germany yet, so they kind of closed their eyes and just did the thing. And because of that trusted third party making a bad decision, the Czechs' gold was stolen by the Germans. In 1971, President Nixon decided to close the gold window, which means that countries that were storing their foreign reserves with the US in the Federal Reserve Bank of New York could no longer convert their dollars into gold. France had been withdrawing gold from their account at the Federal Reserve for years and actually famously sent a warship to do a final big purchase of gold right before the gold window closed. And then, little trigger warning on the next one, but in 2022, when Russia invaded Ukraine, Western governments froze about $300 billion worth of Russia's foreign reserves, which was more than half of Russia's estimated $500 million of foreign reserves at the time. And so I give these three examples because it shows not just bad guys doing this to good guys or good guys doing this to bad guys or allies doing it to each other. It shows that no matter what, when you hold your country's reserves with somebody else, you take a risk that you won't be able to access it when you need it. And so this is three examples from the last 100 years, but this has been happening for thousands of years. It's always been difficult to secure a country's sovereign reserve. It's never been simple. And so now we have Bitcoin, which is this first natively digital hard asset, right? And so that native digital aspect actually is really important here because it's not like gold where you kind of take this physical item and translate it to digital. It's natively digital. The foundation is digital, which means it's a great new different kind of reserve asset. And I like to look at this chart from the bullish case for Bitcoin, which is an article written in 2017, and it does a nice job of comparing Bitcoin to gold as an asset overall. And so because Bitcoin is natively digital, it is incredibly easy to move huge amounts of it at any point in time. Whereas with gold, it takes a ton of effort. You have to send a warship to go move a ton of gold at once. It's way more easy to verify Bitcoin and that you actually own Bitcoin than it is to verify that you own actual gold. With Bitcoin, it's just a cryptographic signature. With gold, you have to do purity testing, weighing, all of these things to make sure it's actually the right mix of gold in the gold bars or coins or what have you. And then as a government, you know that Bitcoin is only going to have 21 million Bitcoin. And so you know exactly how much of the total supply of Bitcoin you own of the asset, which is unlike gold, where you could find a new gold deposit that could significantly increase the asset's overall supply. And so zooming in on this established history point, which Bitcoin scored very poorly on, this article was written 6 years ago. So Bitcoin has now had 6 years of more track record to prove itself. And during that time, and really the decade plus since Bitcoin has existed, Bitcoin has survived multiple crushing bear markets, come roaring back to all-time highs, and is now a $2 trillion asset. So it's clearly here to stay. But as we Bitcoiners like to say, we are still early, because even though it's a $2 trillion asset, gold is an $18 trillion asset. And so as a country, adopting Bitcoin as a strategic treasury asset, you get to benefit from the increase in Bitcoin as it overtakes gold as the world's neutral reserve asset. And it will overtake gold because it has the fundamentals for a digital first world that we're living in today to make it a better reserve asset for countries, companies, and people. So what are some other countries doing with Bitcoin today? You've got El Salvador is the OG Bitcoin country. They've been stacking a Bitcoin a day for years now. And President Bukele recently tweeted that they were up over $300 million on their investment. That's over 100%. Huge for a small country like El Salvador. Bhutan's been mining with hydroelectric power for a few years, first in secret, and then it came out more recently that they've owned 12,000 Bitcoin. It's over $1 billion. Germany sold 50,000 Bitcoin right before the price doubled. It's about a $2 billion mistake. So moral of that story is don't be Germany. Talking to you, Biden. Okay, so let's say you're convinced as a country that you want to secure Bitcoin as a treasury asset. What do you need to think about next? Well, the first thing is, how do you get the Bitcoin? You can acquire the Bitcoin, El Salvador style. You can mine the Bitcoin like Bhutan. You can do a mix of both. And this is really a very country-specific thing that you have to think about in order to decide what's right for you and for your country. But I'm not going to talk too much about this because I want to spend more time on the more important second question, which is, once you have the Bitcoin, how do you make sure you keep it? A reminder of what we talked about at the beginning of the presentation here, just to preload your brain for this next point. Your country's Bitcoin should not be held by somebody else. It is easier than it has ever been to secure Bitcoin as a reserve asset yourself. Use that to your advantage. You may think, okay, I need to go to my kind of traditional financial asset model. I'm going to use a custodian to secure my Bitcoin. But that would be a mistake because Bitcoin reverses some of the traditional self-custody norms, or custody norms, and it's actually a suboptimal way to store Bitcoin to use a custodian. So why is that? I like to think of this rubric that we've made here, and the first and most important thing is control. With self-custody, you have full control of the Bitcoin at any time. When you use a custodian, if the custodian's located within your borders, then you have some amount of control, but you're still needing to ask them to move any Bitcoin for you. And if the custodian is not located within your borders, you can effectively assume that you have zero control of the Bitcoin in any sort of conflict situation. When you talk about the risk of asset seizure or freezing, with self-custody, the risk is pretty low here. It really stems from basically armed invasion of your country or high-level espionage and theft. On the custodian side of things, you don't control the keys. So if somebody can force that custodian to freeze your assets, they will do so. On business continuity, so what happens if the business that you are, or the entity that you are working with to secure the Bitcoin goes out of business or experiences a catastrophic loss? On the self-custody side, you hold the keys, so you can just take those keys and use them elsewhere to access the Bitcoin, and I'll talk more about that in a second. But with a custodian, you are trusting that maybe they have the right legal structure to separate these assets into a bankruptcy remote type of vehicle, but even in that best case scenario, you're probably waiting some amount of time to get access to your assets. And we've had time and time again situations where people were using a custodian and the custodian went bankrupt, had a catastrophic loss, and they're still trying to get access to their Bitcoin. Mt. Gox people are still waiting for some of their payouts, right? Insurance is more difficult to get for self-custody, but it's getting better. A year ago, I would have given this an F. Now we're actually starting to see some larger insurers that are global insurers willing to insure Bitcoin in self-custody as long as you have the right processes and procedures around the internal controls of how you're actually protecting those keys. And on the custodian side, it's a little bit better here. Many custodians will advertise that they have insurance policies, but what this actually boils down to is a broader policy that doesn't really cover all of their customers in a case of catastrophic loss, which is exactly when you need the insurance. And then knowledge of true security basically means, what do I know how these keys were created? Do I know how the keys to the Bitcoin are stored? And with self-custody, you know exactly how they were created because you create it yourself. You know where they're stored and how they're accessed. But on the custodian side, maybe you learned some of this in your due diligence with the custodian, but they can't give you perfect knowledge of how they're storing the keys because they are likely securing Bitcoin for other people too. So if they give you information about how their keys are stored, then they're putting their other customers at risk. So in the worst case scenario, they're just a complete black box. Convenience, I won't sugarcoat it. Self-custody, doing it the right way is going to take a little bit more work. But I really think of this as more perceived convenience because when you are using a custodian, you still need to establish all of these different processes and procedures. Who can move the money at the custodian? At what times? All of these things you would be thinking about anyway with a custodian, you can just apply to your self-custody setup and still get all the other benefits of self-custody here. So to dig in on that business continuity risk, this is the thing that a lot of people don't know about self-custody, and it's really self-custody's superpower, and we call it sovereign recovery. So sovereign recovery means that if the app or product or self-custody business that you're working with to run and manage your treasury goes out of business or has some sort of catastrophic overnight problem and their servers aren't working anymore, you can just take your keys, plug them into a completely different Bitcoin wallet, and your Bitcoin appears like that. And so this gives a huge amount of resilience for your Bitcoin treasury compared to using a custodian where you may have to work through years of bankruptcy or other types of problems here. So a couple of other rapid fire considerations for you that are a lot of people and process considerations that governments need to think about. Who can move the money? Who has access to keys? And who designates those people? Is the president the one designating this? Or are these Treasury, is it the treasurer, the minister of finance? Who has access to move Bitcoin? Where are keys stored? Controlled access locations with high security is ideal in geographically disparate areas. How are they backed up in case the hardware that's actually protecting the keys fails? You need to be able to recover those keys. What's the process for changing those key holders? What are government continuity plans? What happens when you have a new administration come in? You have to be able to smoothly move through these processes without any risk to the Bitcoin treasury. How do you handle compliance and auditing? Are you going to make it public or are you going to keep it private? What's your disaster recovery plan? There's just a lot of considerations to go through, right? And so while it has never been easier to fully control a sovereign reserve asset, it's still a lot of work. And so I want to take one more trip back through history. And because I'm a male in 2024, of course, this has to go back to the Roman Empire. And back in the times of the Roman Empire, there was this highly trained, highly specialized group of soldiers that protected the emperor. And they were known as the Praetorian Guard. And since then, this concept has been reused in sci-fi, like Star Wars and other stories, always to refer to this super specially trained group of people that help protect some of the government's most important assets. And so this was inspiration for us in what we are announcing today, which is an expanded offering for Casa called Praetorian by Casa, the most secure way for nation states to secure their Bitcoin. We're super excited to expand from our offering today for individuals and companies into helping governments, countries, states, cities to secure their Bitcoin treasuries. So why work with us? We're a self-custody company. You control the Bitcoin, not us. We work with you to make sure that it's geographically separated on different hardware that is highly secure and protected and controlled to make sure that you're protected against disasters, theft, loss, all these problems that you need to consider when securing a Bitcoin treasury. You get sovereign recovery because this is self-custody. We will do a custom implementation to work with your country on your very specific needs. And you get a team from Casa who are your expert advisors. They are your Praetorian Guard, embedding with your team for the implementation to make sure that you do everything properly from start to finish. And then last, we have the track record to do this. Out of any other company in the world, we are the experts in this. We've been around since 2018. We protect tens of billions of dollars, have successfully made it through multiple bear markets as a Bitcoin company. And we are excited to help you establish such a reserve, such an important reserve for your country. So, if you are interested in learning more about Casa Praetorian, you can check out the website that's listed here. You can email me directly. This is my contact info. And we're very happy to talk through your individual use case to make sure that we can serve you and your needs best. So thank you very much for your time. Hope you have a great rest of your conference.
Is your company ready for the next evolution in financial strategy? Bitcoin for Corporations is your partner in securing the future of your business. With exclusive membership benefits, our comprehensive masterclass, and a network of trusted service providers, we provide the insights and resources to help you incorporate Bitcoin into your financial strategy, ensuring stability and long-term value. Strengthen your business. Innovate with confidence. Bitcoin for Corporations, protecting your treasury and positioning you for the future.